UK Conservatives demand media pay for conference coverage. Registering for the event this autumn will cost journalists £137 until July 1st, and £880 afterwards. The decision by the ruling Conservative Party to charge journalists attending its annual conference is undemocratic and should be abandoned, a coalition of British media organisations has said. A number of media outlets say the fees are draconian and have refused to sign up for the Tory event, which will take place in Manchester in October, the Evening Standard reported on Saturday. The Conservative Party had already charged journalists to cover the conference last year, saying it was necessary to prevent people from signing up for accreditation and not attending. The party is sticking to the same rules this year. Journalists will have to pay £137, $169, until July 1st and £880, $1,086, afterwards to register. A coalition of industry bodies, which includes groups such as the News Media Association, Society of Editors, News Media Coalition, and Foreign Press Association, warns that the party of Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is setting a deeply concerning precedent in a democratic society. The coalition said that its members are united in viewing as undemocratic and detrimental to the interests of society and the party itself the decision by the Tories to charge journalists to attend the conference. In a democratic society, all party conferences are of considerable political and public importance and, as such, there should be no charging barrier for journalists to be able to act as the eyes and ears of the public by freely reporting at such events, the statement read. The annual Tory conference is more than just a local event, it also provides a window for the global community to see UK democracy in action, it added. The authors of the statement say they have been trying to reach out to the ruling party to discuss the issue of fees for more than a year now, without results. A Conservative Party spokesman told the Evening Standard that the modest charge was introduced to discourage over-accreditation by some media outlets. He claimed that in previous years, thousands of accredited journalists failed to show up, which cost the party tens of thousands of pounds for police security checks and created a lot of paper and plastic waste. There are also exemptions for media outlets in complicated financial situations, he added. Saudi Arabia in talks to join BRICS Bank to enhance funding options. Moscow sees one of the main goals of BRICS' new development bank, NDB, as being to defend the bloc's member states, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, from illegitimate sanctions from the collective West, Russia's Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin underscored when visiting China recently for a business forum. Saudi Arabia is in talks to join the Shanghai-based New Development Bank, also known as the BRICS Bank, according to a statement by the NDB, cited by a U.S. media report. In the Middle East, we attach great importance to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and are currently engaged in a qualified dialogue with them, the statement by the lender read. Adding the country as the ninth member of the bank would strengthen Riyadh's ties with BRICS member states, it was added. It is hoped that as the world's largest exporter of oil joins the bank, as it would serve to bolster its funding options, the report emphasized. The latter were singled out by Ashwani Muthu, Director General of the NDB's Independent Evaluation Office, as the most important thing at the moment. We are struggling to mobilize resources, he was cited as saying, adding that at its upcoming board meetings, the NDB board intended to look into alternative currencies, like China's yuan, also referred to as renminbi, or South Africa's rand. The NDB, established in 2014 by an agreement between BRICS member states Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, was seen as an alternative to Western-led Bretton Woods institutions, like the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, a precursor to the World Trade Organization. The NDB aims to mobilize resources for projects in BRICS countries, as well as other emerging market and developing countries, through the provision of loans, guarantees, and other financial instruments as part of state and private projects. In 2021, the bank admitted Bangladesh, Egypt, the UAE, and Uruguay as new members. All of those countries except Uruguay officially became members upon depositing their instrument of accession. Founding member Russia holds an approximately 19% stake in the bank. However, amidst the Ukraine crisis last year, the bank had to put transactions in Russia on hold, citing the unfolding uncertainties and restrictions. But the sanctions and aforementioned restrictions that came with the NATO-Russia proxy war in Ukraine have served to hasten a dramatic global realignment, triggering renewed talk about alternatives to the dollar, which has served as a Western instrument to bully other countries into submission. Russia's Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin, who led a high-profile delegation to the Russia-China Business Forum recently, underscored that the NDB is conducive to defending the BRICS member states from illegitimate sanctions from the collective West. A growing agglomeration of factors indicate that the dollar is on the path to losing its status as the dominant internationally recognized store of value. Efforts are being made by more and more countries to increase the use of local currencies. A case in point are discussions by the BRICS nations, which have now surpassed the G7 in terms of overall economic power, on the creation of a common currency alternative to the dollar. Saudi Arabia, which is now preparing to join the NDB, has been expressing openness to trade in currencies besides the dollar, most notably including China's yuan. The oil-rich kingdom's finance minister announced this in January. Beijing has been expanding cooperation with Riyadh in recent years on such fronts as the economy, military, and successful diplomatic teamwork, as testified to by the recent China-brokered revival of ties between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Chinese President Xi Jinping visited Saudi Arabia last year, hailing a new era in the country's ties. Furthermore, Saudi Arabia has reportedly been considering joining BRICS. The bloc unites the world's largest developing economies: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Over recent times, a number of other countries have been showing keen interest in joining BRICS, which represents over 40% of the world's population and accounts for close to a third of global economic output. Ahead of the summit of the bloc, set for August 22 in Johannesburg, South Africa, officials and analysts have been expanding upon the possibility of BRICS countries mulling such a new form of currency at the event. Turkey votes in decisive presidential runoff. The results will determine the country's course for the next 5 years. The polls have opened across Turkey in a runoff election that will determine whether conservative President Recep Tayyip Erdogan will retain power, or hand the reins over to his more liberal opponent, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. Polling stations opened at 8 a.m. local time in all 81 provinces, with more than 60 million people eligible to vote in Sunday's runoff. Another 3.4 million Turkish citizens were eligible to vote abroad over the past week, but it is unknown how many cast their ballots. In the first round on May 14, turnout was almost 89% within the country, but only 49.4% abroad. News, forecasts, and commentary on the elections are not permitted until 6 p.m. local time, 1 hour after the polls close. The results cannot be reported until 9 p.m. However, with just 2 candidates facing off, the Supreme Election Board may unveil preliminary results earlier. The first round was held simultaneously with the parliamentary elections, and the complexity of the ballots caused delays and criticism from the opposition. The two rivals hold opposing views on a range of policies, and the outcome of the election may determine the country's course for the next 5 years. Erdogan is a social conservative who has served as president since 2014, and was prime minister for 11 years beforehand. Under his leadership, Turkey has pursued closer trade and diplomatic ties to Russia and China, while positioning itself as a potential peacemaker in regional conflicts, including in Ukraine. Kılıçdaroğlu is a centrist seeking to undo many of Erdogan's domestic reforms, particularly the post-2016 constitutional changes that strengthened the powers of the presidency. He has vowed to immediately restart EU accession talks if elected, and to resuscitate Turkey's economy. The first round ended inconclusively, with no candidate meeting the 50% threshold to win outright. Erdogan garnered 49.5% of the votes, while Kılıçdaroğlu received 44.9%. The third-place finisher, Sinan Ogan, won 5.17% and has since officially endorsed the incumbent. Some 50 Muslim scholars have also endorsed Erdogan, who has portrayed himself as a defender of traditional Islamic values against the more liberal Kılıçdaroğlu, who he once described as an LGBT person. In response, the secularist politician stepped out of character on Friday, declaring it a sin to vote for Erdogan, and that sincere Muslims would not commit such an act. Is AUKUS weaponizing drone swarms against China? The AUKUS military alliance has placed special emphasis on swarm drone technologies in what appears to be an effort to gain the upper hand vis-a-vis China in the Asia-Pacific region. Earlier this week, the British Defence Minister revealed that AUKUS, a trilateral security pact between Australia, the UK, and the US, held its first artificial intelligence, AI, and autonomy trial on April 28 with the aim of rapidly driving these technologies into responsible military use. The trial, organised by the UK's Defence Science and Technology Laboratory, DSTL, brought together Australian, UK, and US AI-enabled assets in a collaborative swarm in order to detect and track military targets in real time. The swarm drone group consisted of British and Australian Blue Bear Ghost and Boeing/In-Situ CT-220 unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. The joint deployment also included Challenger 2 tanks, Warrior infantry fighting vehicles, Viking uncrewed ground vehicles, UGV, as well as 105mm FV-433 Abbott self-propelled howitzers and Czechoslovakia-made OT-90 derivatives of the Soviet BMP-1 infantry fighting vehicle. This trial demonstrates the military advantage of AUKUS' advanced capabilities. As we work in coalition to identify, track and counter potential adversaries from a greater distance and with greater speed, UK Deputy Chief of Defence Staff, Military Capability, Lieutenant General Rob Magowan, said in an official statement. What are drone swarms? A drone swarm is a hybrid warfare technology that envisages a group of drones working together to achieve common goals. Drone swarms have a number of advantages, including increased survivability on the battlefield, enhanced accuracy, better coverage, and adaptability. They could be used for surveillance missions, targeting enemy troops and military assets, overwhelming enemy air defenses, etc. According to tech experts, drone swarms work exactly like bee swarms, separated into queens and workers. Queens use sophisticated onboard algorithms to analyze data and assign tasks to workers in accordance with the circumstances. For their part, the worker drones act on the orders the queens provide. This simplifies the task of the pilot or programmer, who assigns a general task to the group of UAVs, instead of operating each drone separately. AMAS, Pentagon's secret weapons. In February 2023, the media reported that the Pentagon's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, had kicked off a top-secret project named AMAS, Autonomous Multi-Domain Adaptive Swarms of Swarms. The program envisages thousands of drones, equipped with weapons as well as communication and navigation tools, providing the U.S. and its allies with capabilities of jamming radars, penetrating adversaries' air defenses, and launching lethal attacks. DARPA documents say that AMAS will create the ability to dynamically command and control C2, unmanned, autonomous swarms of various types, i.e., swarms of swarms, with a common C2 language. Separately, DARPA is developing the Offensive Swarm-Enabled Tactics program with the aim of training small groups of operators to manage large swarms of aerial and ground-based drones. As of February 2023, AMAS was said to be in the initial stages, with an estimated cost of $78 million. AUKUS trials, AMAS, and RAND's Taiwan War Games. The UK Defence Ministry's announcement of AUKUS artificial intelligence-empowered swarm drone tests prompted international observers to suggest that the development is primarily aimed at gaining the upper hand in a hypothetical conflict with China. In particular, they referred to DARPA's AMAS pre-solicitation documents, which expressed concerns about peer state adversaries that could invade neighboring states. The documents emphasized that this program will be oriented around demonstrating this capability for some specific regional theater-level scenarios. Although no peer state adversaries were named, observers suggested that the Pentagon has Taiwan in mind, an island regarded by the People's Republic of China as its inalienable territory. Over the past several months, the U.S. mainstream media, politicians, and military experts have been speculating about China's alleged plans to invade the island, something that Beijing has resolutely denied. In addition, observers refer to the U.S. Air Force's war games, carried out by the Pentagon in conjunction with independent think tanks, which showed drone swarms particularly effective in scenarios involving the defense of the island of Taiwan against a Chinese invasion. In particular, the influential think tank RAND carried out Taiwan war games in cooperation with the Air Force's Warfighting Integration Capability Office, AFWIC, in 2020. RAND's modeling as well as AFWIC's simulations suggested that large numbers of UAVs organized in swarms could become instrumental in thwarting China's anti-access and area denial capabilities. The latest AUKUS trials also appear to suggest that drone swarms could be used in the Asia-Indo-Pacific theater. The U.S. has recently doubled down on forming regional military alliances in the region with the aim of mitigating challenges posed by China, which Washington has clearly defined as its greatest long-term threat. China and Russia regard AUKUS as an instrument for destabilizing the Asia-Pacific region. Together with NATO's increasing military drills with Pacific nations, the latest drone swarm programs and joint trials send a worrisome signal of potential escalation of tensions in the region. Boris Johnson tried to talk Trump into supporting Ukraine, spokesman. It's unclear whether the former British PM's words changed the Republican frontrunner's mind. Boris Johnson met with ex-US President Donald Trump and tried to convince him of the vital importance of Ukrainian victory, a spokesperson for the former British PM told reporters on Friday. Trump has refused to endorse Kiev's military goals, calling instead for a diplomatic solution to the conflict with Russia. Johnson had dinner with Trump on Thursday, his spokesperson told multiple US and UK media outlets. Boris Johnson MP met President Donald J. Trump to discuss the situation in Ukraine and the vital importance of Ukrainian victory, they said. Johnson has been on a speaking tour of the U.S. for the past week in a bid to drum up support for Ukraine from a Republican Party whose voter base is increasingly skeptical of continued U.S. aid for Kiev. "I just urge you all to stick with it," he told a crowd of conservative lobbyists and donors in Texas on Monday, adding that their support will pay off massively in the long run. From the beginning of Russia's military operation in Ukraine last February and beyond his resignation as Prime Minister last summer, Johnson has consistently been one of the most fervent backers of Ukraine and its president, Vladimir Zelensky. Johnson was one of the first Western leaders to meet with Zelensky in Kiev, and reportedly pushed his Ukrainian counterpart to back out of a Turkish-brokered peace deal last April. Trump, on the other hand, has repeatedly called for peace. Accusing U.S. President Joe Biden of risking a third world war by funneling tens of billions of dollars worth of weapons to Ukraine, Trump has promised to have the conflict settled in one day if elected president next year. Asked by CNN whether he wants Ukraine to win this war, Trump said earlier this month that he thinks in terms of getting it settled so we stop killing all these people and breaking down this country. Pressed on the issue, Trump would not commit to backing Kiev. "They are dying, Russians and Ukrainians. I want them to stop dying," he said. Johnson's spokesperson did not say whether or not Trump was receptive to the former PM's persuasion. The conditions for victory put forward by Zelensky include Moscow ceding the territories of Donetsk, Lugansk, Kherson, Zaporozhye, and Crimea to Ukraine, as well as the payment of reparations to Kiev. Russia has said it is open to resolving the conflict diplomatically, but that any peace deal must include Kiev committing to neutrality and recognizing the new territorial realities of the above-mentioned regions voting to join Russia. Although Biden has promised to keep arming Ukraine for as long as it takes to achieve these objectives, some prominent U.S. officials and commentators have cast doubt on whether Kiev's forces will be able to wage a successful counter-offensive, let alone capture Crimea, which voted to join Russia in 2014. Palme d'Or winner Triet slams French government for repressing pension reform protests. French director Justine Triet, who won the Cannes Film Festival's top prize, criticized in her acceptance speech the government of French President Emmanuel Macron for shocking suppression of protests against the controversial pension reform. Earlier on Saturday, Triet's thriller movie Anatomie d'une chute, Anatomy of a Fall, won the Palme d'Or at the 2023 Cannes Film Festival. This year, the country has been gripped by a historic, extremely powerful, and unanimous protest against the pension reform. This protest was denied and repressed in a shocking way, Triet said, as aired by the Brut digital media channel. French Culture Minister Rima Abdul Malik said on Twitter that she was dismayed by the unfairness of the director's comments, adding that this film could not have been made without our French model of film financing. On April 14, the French Constitutional Council approved the key article of the pension reform bill, which would gradually raise the age of retirement in France from 62 to 64 years by 2030. The reform sparked a strong backlash, prompting people to take to the streets across the country. Over a dozen of nationwide demonstrations against the reform have taken place already, with several protests organized by unions attracting over 1 million supporters across France. Iraq presents project of transport network linking countries south to Turkey. The Iraqi government on Saturday unveiled a major regional transport project, dubbed Route of Development, that will link the southern part of the country with Turkey by rail and land, as a component of Baghdad's ambition to develop a non-oil economy. Presenting the project to a regional conference in Baghdad, Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani touted it as an important contribution to regional integration processes, as cited by the Iraqi news agency. We assure that the Development Road Initiative serves the interests of all regional countries. This transit path for goods and energy will yield substantial developmental gains for Iraq and neighboring nations, Iraqi Transport Minister Razak Mabes was quoted by the Shafaq news agency as saying. The conference was attended by ministers of transport and officials from Iraq, Syria, Turkey, Iran, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and Oman. As a result of the conference, technical committees were reportedly formed to develop a comprehensive concept of the nature and scope of the country's participation in the project. Farhan al-Fartazi, the Director General of the General Company for Ports of Iraq, told media outlets that the project could be completed as early as 2029 if work begins early next year. Tehran slams Zelensky's delusional claims as anti-Iranian propaganda. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeatedly called out Iran for ostensibly supporting Russia with drones amid its ongoing special military operation in Ukraine. He repeated the accusations again on May 24, saying Iranians were being drawn to the dark side of history. Both Iran and Russia have dismissed the claims as false. Tehran has slammed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky for regurgitating baseless claims about Iran supplying Russia with drones for the sake of fueling anti-Iranian propaganda. Delusional claims made by the Ukrainian president against the Islamic Republic of Iran are in line with the anti-Iranian propaganda and media war aimed at attracting as many arms and financial aid from Western countries as possible, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Nasser Kanani said in a statement carried by Iranian media on Saturday. Kanani emphasized that the Islamic Republic of Iran has repeatedly called for finding a political solution to the Ukraine crisis. However, according to the spokesman, Ukraine had specific political goals and motives behind such accusations and was avoiding expert negotiations with the Iranian side to investigate the claims. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who recently made a surprise visit to the G7 summit venue to plead with Western leaders for more weapons, went on a tirade against Iran in a video address on Wednesday. He urged the Iranian people, everyone able to influence government decisions in Iran, against siding with Russia. Why are you on the side of the evil state? Asked the Ukrainian leader, who has been using NATO-made weapons to target hundreds of innocent civilians. Zelensky has been repeating these claims with fervor. He echoed the very same statements when he visited Saudi Arabia to attend an Arab League summit. Last year, Despite the lack of any concrete evidence, accusations of supplying Russia with drones for use in the Ukraine conflict brought Iran under a barrage of sanctions by the US, UK, and European Union. EU spokeswoman Nabila Masrali said at the time that the bloc had collected evidence of Iran's alleged deliveries of the unmanned aerial vehicles, UAV. France, the United Kingdom and Germany had asked the UN to investigate the implementation of the UN Security Council Resolution 2231 endorsing the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on Iran's nuclear program. The resolution, among other things, prohibits Tehran from selling certain types of items able to contribute to the development of nuclear weapon delivery systems without prior approval from the UN. France, the UK, and Germany believe that Iranian drones fall under this rule, but Tehran insists that this is not the case. Iranian and Russian officials have consistently dismissed all the allegations. The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman denied U.S. media reports late in 2022, reiterating his government's position that Iran was not exporting weapons to any party to the conflict. We categorically reject the unfounded and unsubstantiated claims that Iran has transferred UAVs for use in the conflict in Ukraine, Iran's ambassador to the United Nations Saeed Iravani said in October, adding that the political agenda and disinformation against Iran were disappointing. Earlier this month, Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir-Abdollahian also rejected the drone supply allegations. Moscow, in turn, accused the U.S. media of spreading baseless allegations about drone sales. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said that Moscow and Tehran gave exhaustive explanations to the UN Security Council on the alleged use of Iranian drones in Ukraine. Furthermore, Russia and Iran also maintained that the possible UN investigation into the case was illegal as the UN has no mandate to conduct it. Russia also pointed to the flagrant delivery of tens of billions of dollars worth of NATO military hardware to Ukraine, turning the conflict into a Russia-NATO proxy war. French Interior Minister says country's migration laws not strict enough. France's laws on migration are not strict enough, as they should allow more deportations of immigrants convicted of crime, Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin has said. Are we demanding enough with foreigners coming to France? No. Do we have the capacity to ensure sufficient integration? Not really, it appears. Do we have a reasonably tough approach on deportation of foreigners who have committed crime? Not yet, the minister told a French newspaper. At the same time, the number of expulsions of foreigners who have committed crime doubled in 2022, Darmanin stated, adding that existing laws do not allow the authorities to go beyond that. In February, the French government presented a new bill on asylum and migration. It provides for the measures to facilitate expulsions of delinquent foreigners, a structural reorganization of the asylum system, and a mechanism to integrate certain undocumented workers. This is the toughest bill on immigration ever presented by the French government, Darmanin said. The draft law is actively criticized by French non-governmental organizations supporting migrants and a number of trade unions. The critics of the bill published a petition urging the government to scrap it since it is a fundamental violation of migrants' rights. In late April, French Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne said that the government had postponed the consideration of the bill until fall due to a lack of support among lawmakers. NATO chief warns Kosovo against making destabilizing steps. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg warned Kosovo on Sunday against making unilateral, destabilizing steps after Kosovo police clashed with ethnic Serbs in the Serb-majority north. Pristina and Belgrade must engage in the EU-led dialogue now, as the only way to peace and normalization. Pristina must de-escalate and not take unilateral, destabilizing steps, he wrote on social media after speaking to EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell. Kosovo police used force on Thursday to install ethnic Albanian mayors in northern Kosovo following an election in April that was boycotted by a vast majority of voters. The polls were declared valid despite the turnover of less than 3.5%. Serbia's National Security Council accused the NATO-led peacekeeping mission KFOR of inaction. Serbia put its armed forces on full combat alert and moved them close to the border following a Kosovo police crackdown on peaceful anti-government protesters. Over half of Britons want UK to forge closer ties with EU, poll. Slightly over a half of people in the United Kingdom want the government to negotiate a closer relationship with the European Union, a poll commissioned by pro-internationalist campaign group Best for Britain has shown. The survey of more than 10,000 adults, conducted by Focal Data between April 20 and May 9, found that 53% wanted London to pursue closer ties with Brussels, compared to 14% who wanted a more distant relationship and 23% who wanted it to remain unchanged. Almost two-thirds of those sampled said they believed Brexit had created more problems than it had solved, up from just 57% recorded in December 2021. Only 21% of respondents said the United Kingdom's departure from the EU solved more problems than it had created. In just a few short years, public opinion in Britain has moved on from being pro-Brexit, to believing then Prime Minister Boris Johnson's deal has done more harm than good, to now supporting a closer relationship with the EU, Best for Britain Chief Executive Naomi Smith summed it up. A majority 52% also said that the UK should keep its standards and regulations aligned with those of the EU past the end-of-year deadline, while 35% said it should diverge. At least 600 EU laws will expire automatically on December 31 under the UK's retained EU law bill. Israeli Foreign Minister to travel to Central Europe to bolster ties with EU allies. Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen will travel to Central Europe on Sunday in a bid to bolster relations with the allies of the Jewish state in the European Union and seek their support of Israeli policy on Iran. The diplomatic visit to Central European countries is strengthening strategic coordination with our friends, allowing Israel to promote our political and economic interests on the continent, Cohen said in a statement. Friends of Israel in the EU are playing a central role in our relationship with a united Europe, from economic, cultural, and technological cooperation to the joint fight against terrorism and Iran's nuclear project, he added. Cohen will visit Croatia, Slovakia, Hungary, and Austria and meet with senior government officials. This will be his 7th trip to the region in 5 months and the first ever visit to Slovakia of an Israeli foreign minister. He will also take part in a meeting of his Slovak, Austrian, and Czech counterparts. Erdogan clinches victory in Turkey's presidential runoff. Turkey went to the polls on Sunday for a second round of voting in the country's presidential elections after no candidate managed to win over 50% of the vote in the first round of voting on May 14. Incumbent Turkish President Recep Tayyip has secured victory in Turkey's presidential runoff, defeating his rival, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. Erdogan. Polling as the single candidate for the People's Alliance bloc. 152.08% of the vote, compared to 47.92% of votes cast for Kılıçdaroğlu, who ran for the opposition Nation Alliance coalition, according to preliminary results from Turkey's Electoral Commission, with 99% of the vote counted. Speaking to supporters outside his residence in Istanbul, Erdogan thanked them for their votes, and called the election a celebration of democracy. I would like to congratulate all members of our organization, observers at ballot boxes, and our campaign team, Erdogan said. The incumbent thanked the nation's people for entrusting him and his government with 5 more years in office, and said phone calls from world leaders congratulating him have been pouring in. Now world leaders are calling. My brother Ilham Aliyev, President of Azerbaijan, just called. My brother, the President of Uzbekistan, has called. The Prime Minister of Libya has called. They are all calling one after another. And they're saying, if necessary, invite us and we'll come to Turkey right now, Erdogan said. Erdogan is expected to take off for Ankara tonight, and to give a speech at the Justice and Development Party's headquarters in the capital on Monday. Important choice. Erdogan earlier hailed Sunday's vote as the most important choice Turks would have to make in their lives, citing the election's role in determining the future course of the country. Kılıçdaroğlu similarly characterized the election as a choice between 2 candidates and 2 worldviews. In addition to policy differences on the economy, counter-terrorism. Refugees and illegal immigration. Erdogan and Kılıçdaroğlu have been seen to hold divergent views on Turkey's role in regional and global affairs. With the incumbent pushing for greater independence and integration with non-Western dominated institutions, while Kılıçdaroğlu has been seen as pursuing a more traditional line on issues ranging from cooperation with NATO and the European Union to relations with Russia. In the run-up to the election last week, Erdogan emphasized that if he were re-elected, he would not fulfill every demand made by the West, particularly as concerns the imposition of sanctions against Russia, Turkey's largest trading partner. Erdogan's victory can likely be attributed at least in part to last week's decision by first-round third-place finisher Sinan Oğan to support the incumbent president. Oğan and his nationalist ATA alliance received over 5% in the May 14 vote. The 69-year-old incumbent president's victory extends his mandate to the year 2028. He has been a staple of Turkish politics for nearly 3 decades, serving as mayor of Istanbul from 1994 and 1998, as prime minister between 2003 and 2014, and as president from 2014 onward, winning re-election in 2018. Sunday's runoff will further strengthen Mr. Erdogan's legitimacy as Turkey's president, and, thanks to his party's parliamentary majority, will imbue him with near absolute power to change the constitution, political analyst Dr. Ali Demirtaş has told Sputnik. The opposition that has been united like never before has failed monumentally. I am not sure how the opposition could recover from this defeat, Demirtaş said. The Observer pointed out that despite the Western media's overwhelming support for Kılıçdaroğlu and suggestions that he could defeat Erdogan, the opposition candidate's fate was sealed after he struck a de facto alliance with the Green Left Party, which proclaims being the political wing of the PKK, a Turkish Kurdish militant group which Ankara classifies as terrorists. Kılıçdaroğlu also promised the return of those who fled Turkey for being part of the July 15, 2016 coup attempt. They are known as the Gülenist or FETO, Fethullah's terror organization. Kılıçdaroğlu's courting with these people spooked the majority of Turks who somewhat disregarded the relative economic hardships the country has been in, Demirtaş said. The Observer also characterized Sunday's results a serious blow for Washington and President Biden, with the White House failing to win an unquestionably loyal ally. Biden overtly stated his intention to oust Mr. Erdogan by providing support for the Turkish opposition. He also stated that the support would be political and not in the form of military coups, which indicates Washington was behind the previous coups in Turkey. Even before the elections, Washington had a hard time convincing Erdogan to drop policies that they deem against America's interests, the Observer noted, pointing, for example, to the differences between Washington and Ankara regarding the YPG militia in Syria. As Mr. Erdogan has come out stronger out of this election, Washington may resort to engaging in an all-out war against Turkey that would ruin Turkey's economy, which I believe is unlikely however because it would create a ripple effect that would hurt the already ailing European economy. So, I am expecting that Washington will be more lenient toward Mr. Erdogan's demands, Demirtaş said. Demirtaş also believes Erdogan's re-election will mean the preservation of Turkey's balanced approach to the Ukraine conflict, and that Sweden will have to do much more to convince the Turkish president to approve Stockholm's application to join